Blog Talk Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to AJC Radio tonight. Tonight we deal with a very troubling issue, and that is the wrongfully convicted. How is it that routinely people are being locked up that are innocent? How is it that the media shows a very limited view of those stories dealing with the wrongfully convicted? How is it that this country has got it at a point of simply not caring? How did we get to that point when innocent men and women are in prisons across this country that never committed a crime? The answer to that question is they simply do not care. Tonight we tackle that subject, the wrongfully convicted in America, as we start this three-part series. Folks, hang on to your seats. We take off right now. And there you have it. I'm Lamont Banks, along with David Banks, Demetrius Harper, Kendrick Barnes, Dave Zappolo, Samson Riddle, William Williams, Quentin Stewart, Dennis Merritt, and the entire AJC Radio team tonight. This is a subject, ladies and gentlemen, that is deeply troubling, that people spend time in prison that never committed a crime. And people have not only spent, we're not talking a couple of years, and that's equally as wrong, but we're talking about lifetimes, over 20 years, 30 years. In the case of the IRP-5, 8 years removed from loved ones where no crime was ever committed. We have to address that issue. It's very important that we talk about it. And Kendrick, how important is it, at least that we get into discussion along these lines regarding the wrongfully convicted? We've heard a lot of stories. We've heard a lot of things. And how important is it as you being a victim of a wrongful conviction?
Here's why I believe it's extremely important, because this is starting to become a pattern and a trend where, there's a real problem in this country. Just recently, I happened to be watching the news, and it's a nationwide story of a Mr. Strickland, who was convicted of murder, given life in prison, spent 43 years behind bars. They found out that he's innocent, but the state of Missouri still won't let him go home. And the big problem is the current prosecutors are even admitting that he is innocent and did not commit this crime, but you still have the actual convicting prosecutor defending it tooth and nail that this guy should stay in prison, knowing that he is innocent. How can this be a part of a system?
That's right.
How can we sell this that, we have the best legal system in the world? No, we don't. If you have one innocent person in prison, it's too much. And speaking from personal experience, when you are behind bars, your voice is gone. No one hears you. And it's this slow, silent death that you have, because here you know that you've done nothing. And I can't imagine a person spending 43 years in prison for murder, getting sent to maximum security, knowing that I did not do this crime, and no one hears you. Then to find out you're innocent, you think I get relief? They crush you by saying, I'm not going to let you go.
Well, but here's what doesn't make sense to me. If there's evidence to support innocence, you would think it would be a quick move to action to say we have to let these people out. They should not be in. You're talking about people who suffer so much behind bars, and the people that haven't been there, you don't have a clue of the suffering, the anguish of being locked up in a prison for a crime you never committed. You never committed a crime. We're going to talk about not only the IRP-5, Brendan Dassey is a gentleman that reached out to us quite some time ago. I think it's been over a year ago, 6 months to a year, reached out to us in regards to Brendan Dassey. He was convicted at the age of 17, and they did a documentary on Netflix series called Making a Murderer. And if you haven't seen that, you need to go watch it. This guy, a appellate court actually overturned the conviction and said that the police coerced this young boy into his confession. And a higher court came back and said, no, we're going to let that conviction stand. So if a judge said it's clear evidence that coercion happened here, this is a 17-year-old kid. He is still in prison today. We're going to tell his story tonight. Tracy, I believe it's Keogh, is going to be joining us tonight in regards to that. She is the writer for World Vision Australia and creative activist and marketer for Brendan Dassey. We're going to get into that discussion tonight with her as we tell his story. Again, this is a 3-week series because I tell you what, there's a lot of information here. We're going to take, on the other side of the break, we're coming back. Ladies and gentlemen, feel free at any point tonight to dial into the show at 646-200-0628, 646-200-0628, as we tackle a increasing problem, and we're going to get also statistics of the increase in wrongful convictions. How do they continue to rise? Because no one cares. Outside of advocates and loved ones, nobody within this system is wanting to fight for the innocent. And just let them sit in there because you know what? The culture has created this monster. We're going to tackle that monster tonight. Feel free to dial in, folks. This is AJC Radio. We'll be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you a question? Did you know that there are over 2.4 million people behind bars in the United States? I'll ask you one more question. Were you aware that that is the highest number of people behind bars in the entire world? The United States makes up of only 5% of the world's population, but we have over 25% of the world's prison population. America prides itself on being the most advanced and progressive nation on earth. However, sadly, we are also the world's most archaic. I'm going to give you a personal invitation to get involved with the fight against mass incarceration. Take a few moments to call 1-855-529-4252. That is a just cause, and we fight for justice. Again, call a just cause today. Don't delay. Call 1-855-529-4252. It is time, and I say high time, that we take America's incarceration seriously. Won't you join us? Call today.
There are no loose ends in TV procedural dramas. At the end of the hour, the bad guy always gets what's coming to him. Unfortunately, the real world is a lot more complicated. We know from the work of the Innocence Project and other organizations in the Innocence Network that the system doesn't always get it right. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, since 1989, nearly 2,000 people have been exonerated of crimes they didn't commit. What people don't realize is a good number of those people pleaded guilty to crimes even though they were innocent. In fact, in nearly 10% of the nation's DNA exonerations, people pleaded guilty to serious crimes and agreed to serve significant prison time because the system is stacked against them, especially if they are poor and people of color. That's right. The stakes are so high that we have innocent men and women agreeing to serve long prison sentences. A system that puts that much pressure on people to plead guilty is a problem. Visit guiltypleaproblem.org to learn more about the men and women who are pressured into pleading guilty to crimes they didn't commit. And join us in demanding that our elected officials do something to protect the innocent people who get caught up in a broken criminal justice system. Thank you.
We know you care. Now it's time. Time to change the face of justice. Did you know that minority and youth participation in juries is extremely low to non-existent?
The incidence of youth and minority offenders faced with trials have exploded.
Youth and minorities are not being represented as they should be.
We must represent for people to get fair trials.
If you acquire a state ID or driver's license, it allows you to register to vote, and it allows you to become eligible for jury service.
If you're 18, a U.S. citizen with a state ID or driver's license, and registered to vote, you're eligible to be called for jury duty.
If called and selected, make it your duty to serve.
We can't get justice without you. Change
the face of justice.
Check your local county or state jury service website for further details.
Let me tell you who to blame. Blame the boy lying at your feet, his body oozing life through the hole in his stomach where the bullet tore him apart. Blame him for challenging you, for not looking away and for not backing down when you pulled out the gun. Blame your mother for bringing you into this world when she was but a kid herself and for dragging you up, not bringing you up. Blame society for not giving you hope. Blame your father for not being there, the man who looked after himself instead of looking after you. Blame the gun in your hand for making you a target, for making you more likely to be picked on. Blame the dead boy, blame your mother, blame society, blame your father, blame the gun, blame anyone but yourself for not being strong enough to put down the gun, to break the cycle.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to AJC Radio tonight. Dealing with wrongful convictions and the culture in this country with wrongful convictions and the fact that the attitude of a nation is that we simply do not care about the wrongfully convicted. You can have folks that have been wrongfully convicted that when they get out of prison and they're proven that, you know what, an error was made, it's probably a 10-second clip about the wrongful convicted. You're not seeing in-depth reporting regarding those wrongful convictions, that this is a tragedy. You're not seeing outrage by a country and a nation whose criminal justice system has fallen off of the tracks. Where is the outrage in regards to that? William, give me your thoughts, please.
You know, I think what people need to understand is that for the past, say, 10 years, we started seeing things like the Innocence Project. We started hearing words like exoneration. And those are things that, you know, for me personally, I had not heard until being involved with Just Cause and then just looking at the news. And you're constantly seeing these people that have served time. And like you said at the opening of the show, you're talking about 20 years, 28 years, 30 years. Any of our listeners can go out right now and look at the Innocence Project, and you'll look at a list of men that are out there and women that have served I'm talking about a great portion of their lives. And you read their stories, and it's like the evidence was there at the beginning in a lot of these cases. They served time, spent a significant amount of their life, only to come back and say, oh, well, he was innocent or she was innocent. And they can never get that time.
It.
That's it. It's like, hey, you know, sorry. I mean, what do you say when you've taken 30 years, 20 years from somebody's life?
But listen, here's the problem. And again, the number is one thing, the number of years that we see, but the person that goes to prison for 6 months. Let's talk about LaWanda Banks Clark. Never been in trouble a day in her life. You take her from her family, put her out of the state of Colorado in an Arizona prison, women's prison, federal prison, and she was innocent. And when information was provided that would have showed her innocence, it was ignored. It was told it doesn't matter. That's the attitude. It doesn't matter. But this girl, young lady, I believe the stress that she was under ultimately contributed to the death of LaWanna Banks Clark and what they did to her in this criminal justice system. And you have to be a cold person to not care, not to show any type of, you know what, this is not right. Let's right the wrong that was done. That's not the attitude with wrongful convictions. And they come up, but I'm telling you, say, oh, I caught that on YouTube. I saw something on YouTube, or I saw something on TikTok, or I saw something here. Guess what? That's all you're going to get out of it. Why is that is the question that we're dealing with on this show. Why is it those lives do not matter? You take an innocent person, put him in a jail cell in a violent environment. They did it with Khalif Browder.
He wasn't charged.
He wasn't even charged.
He wasn't even charged. He spent 3 years of his life.
And Rikers ultimately causing him to take his own life out of fear he would go back. Never committed a crime. So they basically convicted him. Said, you know what? We don't even have to have you up on charges to send you to Rikers Island, which is one of the most violent, if not the violent, jail systems in New York. It's horrible.
In our country.
In our country. This is something that has to be discussed. David, your thoughts on this as we dig into this one?
Well, it's a horrible indictment of the criminal justice system as a whole. According to the National Registry of Exoneration, 2 to 10% of people in prison are wrongly convicted and sitting in prison. And keep in mind, in 2019, when they put this out, there were 2.3 million incarcerated people, which if you compute that out, 46,000 to 230,000 people, innocent people, are in prison.
Say that number again for me.
46,000 to 230,000
are innocent?
Are innocent that's in prison. Mm-hmm. Okay, now you go to now you watch the news. That's why you know that nobody cares. I've watched I don't care if it's Fox News, CNN. I've watched them report on a wrongful conviction. They will report. They ask no questions about how did this happen in the U.S. criminal justice system that a person wrongly lost their liberty and freedom. But you can't beat them talking about the Constitution, liberty, and all this other type stuff. But I'll go ahead and say it: when as soon as a cop is injured on Fox News, or shot, or something is done wrong to a cop, they're going to beat it to death about how bad that people are demeaning the police. They're doing all this other type stuff. And like you said, I don't have a hatred of police by any stretch of the imagination. But at the same time, if you're not willing, this is equivalent. Look at the COVID deaths. Well, 46 people died. Suppose 46,000 people died from COVID. They'd be all over the place. Well, get vaccinated, do all this other type stuff. Well, what about 46,000 or 230,000 people that have been lost their freedom and went to prison? That's a very serious matter, and it's a serious failing of the so-called justice system. And so you can't. There's a very sadistic, self-righteous, corrupt underbelly that is at the foundation of the criminal justice system. Even the judges and prosecutors, just like you mentioned, Ken mentioned, the prosecutor convict them, don't want to let them out, even though there's proof of innocence. And in one other case I read, the prosecutor, when there was DNA evidence that he was innocent, the prosecutor said he should stay in prison. He did something wrong.
Listen, I don't think people understand. Picture your life, all these years, going to work, taking care of your family, enjoying the holidays, the things, the liberty, and picture a situation where somebody shows up at your house, snatches you out of your house, puts you in a van, takes you to an unknown location. Do you know the horror of that? That is the equivalent of a wrongful conviction. A person that did nothing, committed no crime, and their whole life. Let me go to the RP 5. You go to these men. You strip them of everything that they believed this system was. You take them from their families as their families cry and weep because of a loved one being snatched in a moment. And you know them to be innocent. You take kids from their parents. You take these men from their community, from their churches, and you snatch them in a moment. There should be outrage for that. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're black, if you're white, what nationality you come from. So if people sit comfortably back and say, we have the best system, we have the worst system.
That's right.
We have the worst system. You can say what you want to say. And until injustice visits your front door and snatches your daughter, your son, your parents, your grandma, these people snatch the elderly that are innocent. That's why the seriousness of it is what it is. That's why we have to talk about it. And the news media, they're a joke. Where's the producer saying we must tell this story? And if you didn't have advocates out here fighting to get the story known, we don't even know half of the people that sit in a prison cell and cry themselves to sleep every night when they know they've done nothing wrong. And you tell me we have the best system? I got news for you. Wake up. Wake up. Dave.
You look at everything that's done. I mean, for us, the IRP 5, it was 9 years ago this week that we were sentenced and were remanded into prison for 8 years. I still remember that day like it was yesterday, standing in front of that judge and that judge saying, 121 months, good luck to you. The heartlessness, and it was the same judge and prosecutor that put LaWanna Clark Banks in prison. And when you have these prosecutors that are win at any cost, no matter what they see for the innocence, I'm still putting people in prison. Those are the ones that have to be removed from their position.
Period.
Yes.
And when you have a prosecutor, this is what is so alarming. DNA is at a whole nother level today. To exonerate the innocent. Say you thought these people did it. And we didn't have the technology we have today. But you have a way. You have a way to say, when a defense attorney comes to the court and says, hey, we asked the court to allow DNA testing, it will prove the innocence of my client that went to prison 10 years ago. Do you know the prosecution objects? They object to the truth.
They fight tooth and nail against it. Now, if they felt that they were so right, why would they fight it? Oh, this is going to prove that I was right and he should be in prison.
Right.
But no, they fight.
And a judge that allows it. See, the corruption is from the top down. If you go before a judge's court and says we would like DNA testing because it will prove innocence, the prosecutor is to seek justice. In all situations, that's his job. Seek the truth. They don't seek the truth.
No, they don't. They and we watched it with these guys. These guys, our system is so corrupt. It is so corrupt, and they steer the judge and the prosecutors. They steer these cases in the directions that you want. We literally asked. We did our exit interviews. Talked to one of the jurors. The guy said, "Listen, we were sitting there. We were asking where was the defense. Now this is in the IRP 6 case. I talked to the man on his front porch. He's there, and all he's doing is being given morsels of misinformation and this court allows this crap to happen. It is biased. The scales are not even anymore. You go in there with the assumption of guilt. They make you look that way.
But
and then you're fighting for your life to try to be innocent.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, to William's point, we were there. We lived it. As Dave said 9 years ago, we were in the courtroom. None of our evidence, when you talk, Lamont, you talk about the judges and the prosecutors, I think we had 9 pieces of evidence compared to over 280. And so when the jury asked, is there anything else to consider? They were looking. They know we were innocent, but there was nothing. That crooked judge in Colorado, Christine Arguello, would not allow any of our evidence to be submitted, be considered to the jury. So when you talk about wrongfully convicted, that's exactly what happened to us, but everyone was in on it. The appellate court was in on it. They wanted to put us away, like Mott said, away from our families because there was a sore these people are evil.
Well, it states here, John Grisham wrote this, and if you know anything about John, he's an author. He says wrongful convictions happen every week in every state in this country, and they happen for all the same reasons. Sloppy police work, eyewitness identification is the worst type almost, because it's wrong about half the time. 50% of the time, eyewitness identification in crimes are wrong. And then here's the greater evil: the wrongfully convicted who died on death row, whose lives. And I just read a story the other day. They had it on TikTok, and the gentleman, they said, after this man was sentenced to death a few years ago, this week, evidence came out that DNA was with another person, but this man was already dead. They killed this man. He was not even the man that committed the crime. Yes, Samson.
Yeah, so I was actually reading an article similar to that where they said, like, in at least the last decade and a half, had they allowed any case review, response, or anything like that, they would have resulted in at least somewhere between 52 and 65% exonerations based on DNA evidence alone. Now, we're looking at it since 1989, okay? Since 1989, okay? We're talking like more than 30 years, about 30 years or so ago. We've only had less than 3,000 exonerations, okay? 3,000 exonerations out of a 2.2 million personnel populace. We're talking about 0.1% of our populace has been set free for something they were wrongfully convicted. And as Dave alluded to earlier, we're talking about somewhere close to 46,000 or more.
46,000 to 230,000.
And 30,000.
That's a drop in the bucket of what the justice system should be doing for these people to actually go in there. They're getting all types of money anyway. Spend some of that money to research these people that are behind bars for nonviolent crimes, or even have something out there that they would say, hey, I didn't do it. And if there's any type of plausible deniability to that case, research it. We have the technology, like you said earlier, we have the technology to actually look into this and prove it yes or no. If these attorneys are worried more about doing justice than getting a body count, then they won't object. If their case is solid, they won't object. Otherwise, they're just being cowards and hiding behind a crooked system.
No, without question, that's exactly what it is. And I think it's a troubling... Dave, did you have something else?
Well, you were talking about eyewitness testimony. And in that case, they've shown so many times how that is wrong. One of the big things, and I've seen this video, is they have a group of people that are watching a video of men passing a basketball. And they say, now watch the men passing the basketball. When the video is over, they say, did you see anything strange? And over half of them say no. And during that video, a person in a gorilla suit walks through the video. Now, when you see something like that, pay attention to this, and they can't identify that a gorilla walked through. How are they going to identify a person? And then you have the instance where, and this gentleman went to prison for years on rape and murder, where a little girl said he looked like Daddy, and they put Daddy in prison. Well, the man that was the perpetrator lived next door, and he looked like Daddy. So you don't even care. They didn't test the DNA. When they finally tested the DNA, it matched the person next door. And they still took a year to release the gentleman that was in prison. And they knew, here's the DNA, here's everything. We're going to wait still another year just to make sure. And then they didn't arrest the person that actually committed the murder and the rape.
Well, and we'd like to, a Ninth Circuit appellate court judge by the name of, the Ninth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals by the name of Alex Kaczynski, he's since retired, wrote a article in the Georgetown Law Review, I think it was in 2015, discussing how the U.S. criminal justice system is based solely on assumptions. He also put the myth of the criminal justice system down. Now, this is a highly respected federal appellate court judge, and he says the myths are that eyewitnesses are highly reliable, which we've just mentioned here. Fingerprint evidence is foolproof. That's a myth. Other types of forensic evidence are scientifically proven and therefore infallible is a myth. DNA evidence is infallible. That's a myth. Human memories are reliable. That's a myth. Confessions are infallible because innocent people never confess. He says that's a myth. Juries follow instructions. That's based on assumptions. They don't check with juries to see what they actually believed. Were there any bias on the jury? All this other, so all that juries actually occur in a black box. So nobody knows what these people are thinking. They're assumed to tell the truth when they say, I can be fair and impartial about their background and all that. All that's based on assumptions, which is a key point that Judge Kaczynski made. That prosecutors play fair. We know that's an untrue. We witnessed it firsthand. The prosecution is at a substantial disadvantage because it must prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. That's not that's a myth. Police are objective in their investigations. He says it's another myth. Guilty pleas are conclusive proof of guilt. Another myth. And that long sentences deter crime is another myth that he discussed in Criminal Law 2.0. So while you think the wrongly convicted are sitting around just woe is me, we got sour grapes because we got caught and they didn't really want to go to prison, they wanted to get away with something, simply not true. The justice system has many issues with it, the U.S. justice system, and it's highly unreliable. But nobody wants to do anything. Nobody wants to admit that, nor do they want to do anything about wrongful convictions when they actually happen, because honestly, their ego is at play. I don't want to look like I did this wrong and I was responsible for sending somebody innocent to prison. If I believe they went to prison, if I believe they did it, irrespective of the evidence. That's many prosecutors and judges' mentality. It doesn't matter what the evidence shows. I believe they did it. We can't really prove it, so we're going to railroad them somehow, get them in prison. We witnessed this firsthand, and until you go through this criminal justice system as a defendant, you don't have a clue of what you're talking about.
No, absolutely right. And we're going to dig more into this, folks, here over the next few weeks. And listen, this stuff is heart-wrenching. Every time I think of my brothers here, the RP5, I don't have words. I'm outraged because you take the innocent. There's a quote out there that says, better that 1,000 guilty men go free than one innocent man go to prison. Do you understand the magnitude of that? Set 1,000 guilty free versus sending one man whose liberty is taken from him, one woman whose liberty is taken from them, a justice system that is complicit in the death of our sister, LaWanda Banks Clark. Should have never been sent to any type of institution because she never committed a crime. What is the value of human life? We've lost it. This country has lost it. This system has lost it because of egos, as David alluded to, and the arrogance. Rather than look bad, you let an innocent man rot in prison because I don't want to look bad. Just let him stay there.
And you let him get executed.
People died.
People actually died. I'm looking at an article. It says the death penalty carries the inherent risk of executing an innocent person. Since 1973, at least 185 people who have been wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death in the U.S. have been exonerated.
That have died. It's incomprehensible. We're going to bring our guest on now, folks, to get into this conversation and the Brendan Dassey story. Right now joining us is Tracy Keogh, writer for World Vision Australia and a creative activist and marketer for Brendan Dassey. Tracy, are you with us?
I am indeed. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Am I pronouncing Mr. Dassey's name correct?
You are indeed.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad I pronounced your name correct as well.
You did.
Okay. Tracy, I don't know how long you've been listening to the show. I'll tell you what, this is a heart-wrencher here, and I am excited to talk about Brendan. I know we had talked to some of the folks connected to Mr. Dassey about 6 months ago or so, and we just hadn't done the show on the wrongfully convicted, but we were able to know that this would be the show that we would highlight his story. And I'm going to give you the floor to talk about Mr. Dassey. I am heartbroken over what this young man has gone through, and reading his story, and then the series that the documentary series on Netflix that everybody's been talking about, The Making of a Murderer, back in 2015. Some serious stuff. One of our co-hosts actually saw that. Actually had an opportunity to see that in full, and we're going to get in conversation with him as well. He said it was very, very hard to watch. So let's get into that tonight. This series is going to be going for 3 weeks. You're welcome anytime during those 3 weeks, Miss Tracy, to come on back on this show and talk about this stuff, because it's too broad to do in one show. We can't get everything in. So why don't you introduce yourself to our guest, and let's talk about the wrongful conviction of Mr. Dassey, okay?
Yeah, would love to. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to spread awareness for Brendan. As you said, I'm a writer. I consider myself a creative activist. I live in Melbourne, Australia. I've always held a healthy disregard for injustice. And when I virtually walked into the interrogation room of Brendan Dassey in January 2016, it literally set me upon a life-changing journey. And I'm not alone. There's millions of others felt the gut punch of watching this child's vulnerability and the anger and disgust of what unfolded, and to do nothing was a crime. To walk past it felt like a crime. So I jumped online, like millions of others, sought out his legal team, and 5.5 years later, I'm all in, and always have been. You know, at the time of his arrest, Brendan was a 16-year-old kid. He was in the 10th grade at Mishcot High. He'd never had any interaction with law enforcement. He was quiet, socially reserved. You know, all of these things we know about Brendan. He loved his PlayStation and animals. But what a lot of people don't know, they know that he had some type of disability, but that's been unpacked further recently. And, you know, at that time, Brendan was functioning between the age range of 5 to 11 years. You know, it's he'd been taking a mixture of special ed and normal classes, but he didn't take normal classes because he was capable of them, but because the law required it. And since a young child, he's been repeatedly diagnosed with learning disabilities, which, you know, there's a slew of IEPs that testifies to that. And each of them document his struggle with language and comprehension. You know, he had an aversion to socialization. And in particular, and it's worth noting, his inability to understand idioms. Idioms like the truth will set you free, as we tragically saw. So, you know, it's been a journey for for people like myself. And as I said, I'm not alone. There's a burgeoning community of people that support Brendan, and through that support, they've gone on to become aware of other wrongful conviction cases, and it's gone on from there. It really is a global effort, I think, at this stage, and there's a perspective on the U.S. criminal justice system that people like myself living in Australia knows more about than my own criminal justice system here in Australia.
Yes, and Tracy, what I read here is that a judge ruled that a federal magistrate judge ruled that Dassey's confession had been coerced, overturned his conviction, and ordered him released. Was he ever released for any period of time?
No, sadly not. So we know, history tells us that the U.S. Magistrate Judge William Duffin overturned Brendan's conviction in August of 2016. He found that the investigators violated Brendan's constitutional protection against self-incrimination and his right to equal protection under the law. He cited repeated false promises, the factors involving, Brendan's age, his intellectual deficits, and the absence of a supportive adult, rendering Brendan's confession involuntary under the 5th and 14th Amendments. Now, this was an incredible time for people who believed and support Brendan. There was incredible hope, and I think it was probably the first hope that, this young man had, because if you think about pre-Making a Murderer, Brendan Dassey was considered and labelled a hapless murderer. People had forgotten about him outside of those labels. So I know he came very, very close to being released. His team fought very hard. The Wisconsin Attorney General at that time, Brad Schimmel, was filing appeal after appeal. Even Judge Duffin himself wanted and granted supervised release from prison for Brendan. And there were only hours to go to his release. I remember this vividly because, I was fortunate to have an insight to what was going on. But, they're literally hours away from stepping outside of the prison. Brendan was sitting in his cell. He was ready to leave. He'd given away everything that he had and had changed into brand new clothes, right? So he was hopeful. Outside, he could hear the noise of the news vans and the journalists setting up to cover his release. And with only hours to go, the Seventh Circuit Court ruled that Brendan remained incarcerated pending the state's appeal. So he got extremely close, but the Attorney General of Wisconsin at that time, Brad Schimmel, just kept putting barrier after barrier in front of him,
So, oh boy. So this kid is ready to leave prison. He's packed up. He's given it, which is customary that if you're leaving prison, you kind of get rid of everything. Hey, man, I'm leaving here. The cruelty of the system is over the top for me, and probably everybody, including yourself, is just, it's the most outrageous, cruel system. And if a judge saw enough to say you violated Brendan's constitutional rights under the law and ordered his immediate release, he should have been released. That tells you how cruel the system is.
Absolutely. And I think, Brendan's case in point, if you read through how it's a systemic failure across the board from the moment that child was brought into for questioning and how that was handled through to, Governor Evers' denial of clemency in the December of 2019. Brendan was failed at every level and from every person charged with protecting him through that. But when you read through the appeals process, it's like a timeline of torture because it's like we're giving you hope, right? So for the first time in years, Brendan has hope, his family has hope, his lawyers have hope. And then you've got a state attorney general who's going, you know what, the preservation of a conviction is worth more than looking at, you know, the pursuit of the truth in this case. And for somebody like Brendan, you know, where there was zero DNA linking him to any crime, even the head of the state crime lab during the Stephen Avery trial testifies that there's zero DNA evidence linking Brendan to anything too. And I believe there were over 500 items tested, right? But just looking at the torture that they put him through, it was like giving him hope, taking it away, giving him hope, taking it away, giving him hope and taking it away. And you're right, the system is set up to keep people incarcerated. You know, once the system has gotten hold of somebody, you know, it's a profitable system for those who benefit from people being incarcerated. And they took a child and they thought nothing of it.
So, Tracy, at 16, so no parents, no adult, no guardian person is even there with this 16-year-old who, from what we read, had an IQ, a very low IQ, which basically put him in a category of mental health challenges.
Yes, correct.
And so how do you do that to a kid who's mentally disabled? And you lock it. Those are the things that are just, you're trying to wrap your hands around this. And I'm going to let Dennis actually saw the documentary in its entirety. Is right, Dennis?
Yes, I did, and I wanted to bring up the interrogation. I mean, that was there is no way anyone in their right mind could have watched the interrogations of Brendan and not see that something was majorly wrong. There was coercion. I mean, this kid, you could tell that he was not. You could tell that he was at a level of in which his age he wasn't even there, but yet, oh my God, they took advantage of him. They put words in his mouth. They spinned it. They did everything, and you still tell me that after seeing that, despite the outcry, because it was enough to get up an appeal, but he's still in prison. That is just unbelievable. There is no one that I know could have watched that and said, "Hey, that kid was done wrong."
Well, I got a quick comment. Now I looked at an appellate court panel of the Seventh Circuit, is my understanding, overturned his conviction, and then an en banc court put him back in prison or upheld his conviction 4-3. And from what I can see, there was a number of very passionate dissents speaking to that particular issue of his inability, his mental disability, and the coercion and the just abusive interrogation that he underwent. It just goes to show you that prosecutors, I've always thought the system is crony, but almost like the prosecutor went shopping to some of his friends in the Seventh Circuit and got a 4-3 opinion. Yeah. And how can there be an opinion this divided on this set of facts is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we're looking at the interrogations for people listening who perhaps, have been living under a rock, right? So I dare say that most of the Western world and others have some knowledge of what Brendan was subjected to. But, he interviewed as a kid at 16 6 times from November of 2005 to March 2006. 4 interrogations in 48 hours, and 3 of those were in a 24-hour time frame. So if we remember Brendan's functional age, which is 5 to 11, and the fact that he couldn't comprehend sentences longer than 5 words. He could not understand what they were saying to him. So in the March 1st interrogation alone, he's asked over 1,200 questions by the investigators. This is a question every 9 to 10 seconds. So not only did Brendan not understand his Miranda warnings, which differed each time they were read to him, he clearly had no understanding of what was playing out before him. And we see that, right? And they were leading him to inculpate himself in a horrific crime. And it's so clear that he's guessing, which is evidenced by the who shot her in the head sequence. And I think, just coming back to something that you said, you know, the world having that perspective into his interrogation and the reaction it elicited in millions of people has literally started a movement, right? And you don't need to be a lawyer or a police officer in that moment to understand that was what was happening was incredibly wrong. You just had to be human, right? Because you watching it, you knew there's a lack of humanity that these officers have. He was a vulnerable kid, and they were experienced investigators using the Reed technique, which is developed for seasoned adult criminals. They used it badly, and they weaponized it against him. You know, so when we talk about the en banc decision, and you're absolutely right with the defense, they were searing defense, which really spoke to the judicial ignorance of the 4-3 majority. You know, I think all of those things are really important for, you know, people who perhaps haven't done a deep dive into the case to know that this child, and he was a child, he was 16, but his mental capacity was between 5 and 11. This is proven. We know that. You know, and the officers just took advantage of him. You know, there was false evidence ploys. There was, you know, the fatherly figure type of stuff. All of what Reed teaches.
Right. And I think the tragedy of this is that if his mental capability is 5 years to 11, you got questions coming at this kid every 9 seconds. Yeah. You overwhelm this kid. He doesn't even comprehend what you're even talking about. And to lock this young man, this kid, the judge should be removed from the bench. The police officers that interrogated this kid should be charged criminally. Should be charged.
And Lamont, if you can imagine a reenactment, I would like to see a reenactment of this interrogation with an actual 5-year-old, and you would see how people would respond to it. I think that would be something like that would just outrage people even more. The mental capacity of a 5 to 11-year-old, put one of those kids in a reenactment and allow the public to see exactly what was going on. The outrage over a child, a literal child of 5 to 11 being just completely abused by police officers.
Well, we talk all the time regarding the mentally ill, the mental challenged inmates that are locked up that need care. This kid needed care. Should have never been talked to without a parent, without a guardian. And that is criminal, what they've done to this kid. Tracy, we're going to do...
Right. I mean, there was no parent, there was no lawyer, there was no interested third party. And, you know, the February 27th interrogations, that was very purposeful. You hear in the transcripts that at the end of the interrogation, they then tell him that they're going to call his mother. So it was very purposeful. And what I think is frightening, and should be frightening for every parent, is that Brendan's school did nothing to protect him in those moments. That, you know, they didn't contact his parents. It's actually legal for law enforcement to take a child as young as 10 out of the classroom and interrogate them without a parent present. That's frightening.
It really is. I mean, it's really bad. I would recommend to all of our listeners tonight to go out and watch Making the series. It's on Netflix. You can pull it up. Making a Murderer, which talks about the Brendan Dassey story. And it says here, as far as supporters, Kim Kardashian West previously expressed her support for Brendan Dassey as well in 2019. She tweeted Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers and urged him to read Brendan Dassey's letter requesting a pardon. That means this hit all levels of society that were outraged about this kid. Tracy, we're going to take a quick break. I want to come back and talk about Avery, the uncle. What's his situation? We're going to dig more into this, ladies and gentlemen. Feel free to dial into the show, 646-200-0628, 646-200-0628. I tell you what, we got a long way to go on this one. Tracy, we'll be right back.
Mass incarceration means that we've got a very high rate of incarceration historically, comparatively. And the other thing is the rate of incarceration is so high, so socially concentrated, we're no longer incarcerating the individual, but we're incarcerating whole social groups. The rate of incarceration now is about 5 times higher than it was historically. Historically, it was 100 per 100,000. Now it's about 500 per 100,000. If we look at prison, if we add jail to that, it's about 700 per 100,000. Nowhere in the world incarcerates as much as we do. We've seen extremely high rates of exposure to the criminal justice system for African American men with very low levels of schooling. So if we think about black men who were born in the late 1970s and who are growing up through the American prison boom of the 1980s and the 1990s, the chances that they're going to serve time in state or federal prison if they dropped out of high school is about 70%. So going to prison for that group of black men with very low levels of schooling, that's become a normal life event. And that's really only happened in the last 10 years. We're at this point now where there's about 1.2 million African American children with a parent who's incarcerated. That's about 1 in 9. The research shows that kids who experience parental incarceration have diminished school achievement, they have behavioral problems, depressive symptoms, acting out. And there's also evidence that these kinds of negative effects associated with parental incarceration are concentrated more among boys than among girls. And there's a very real risk here that incarceration becomes an inherited trait. The underlying issue is we've chosen prison as a way to respond to that problem of crime. And there are a whole variety of ways that we could have chosen to respond to that problem of crime. We've chosen the response of the deprivation of liberty. And we've chosen the response of the deprivation of liberty for a historically aggrieved group whose liberty in the United States was never firmly established to begin with.
For a kid whose mom or dad is in prison, life is tough. Now add a wrongful conviction to that, life just got a little bit tougher. Trying to explain to friends why mom or dad is not at the school play or at the ball game is something that no kid should ever be faced with, especially if mom or dad is innocent. Ladies and gentlemen, get involved today to stop the epidemic of wrongful convictions. By remembering a just cause with a monthly, annual, or one-time donation, you can help in the fight against wrongful convictions. Call a Just Cause today, 1-855-529-4252. We seek justice for the children as they go to bed at night and mom's not there, dad's not in the other room to make them feel safe. Not because dad or mom did anything wrong, because justice could not be found. Join us for the children, for they truly are our future.
Over 1 million people are sitting in the prisons of America for nonviolent offenses. That's why I'm asking you to join the American Civil Liberties Union and help us in the fight to end mass incarceration. We spend over $80 billion a year incarcerating people. Alternatives to prison, like community service, drug treatment, and rehabilitation, costs less and can turn lives around. It's time for fair justice. It's time for smart justice. And we need your help.
I can solve difficult problems for a Fortune 500 company.
I can run a successful business.
I can manage your home improvements.
I can publicize your message.
I can motivate your audience.
I can put my military experience to work for your company.
I can teach your children.
I can boost your bottom line.
I can add value to your workplace.
I could be a loyal and productive employee.
But I can't put my skills to work for your organization
if I'm not given the opportunity.
If you don't recognize my talent and ability.
If you don't hire me. If you don't have an open mind and a workplace that's open to everyone.
If you don't realize that America works best when everybody works.
What can you do?
What can you do?
What can you do?
You can remember that it worked.
It's what people can do.
It's what people can do that matters.
Nearly 50 million Americans have disabilities. Capitalize on their talents with employment practices that benefit everyone. Learn more at whatcanyoudocampaign.org.
He must have thrown 1,000 pitches teaching him to hit a home run. Spent countless Saturdays running routes so he could learn to hit an open receiver. Endless afternoons teaching him how to hit the three-pointer. But how much time have you spent teaching him? Teaching boys that all violence against women is wrong is one of the most important things a man can do. Learn how to start the conversation at teachearly.org. Brought to you by Futures Without Violence and the Ad Council.
Hey guys, I'm Jordan Sparks.
I'm Chase Crawford. And what's up? It's Usher.
Hi, I'm Rachel Bilson.
I'm Hayden Christensen. I'm Peyton Manning.
Hey, we're Fall Out Boy.
I'm David Archuleta.
I'm Corbin Blue.
I'm Kristen Bell.
And we're the Jonas Brothers.
Do something good for your community.
Reuse bags and bottles and always recycle.
Help us collect 1 million pounds of food.
Help people prepare for natural disasters.
Do something about homelessness.
Anyone could be a rock star in their community.
So then do something.
Do something.
Do something. Do something.
Visit DoSomething.org to find out how.
You're on your way to meet up with friends, but you can't seem to get anywhere quickly. You don't want your friends to be annoyed, so you text. You're on your way. "5 seconds is the average time your eyes are off the road while texting while driving. Make sure you get where you're going.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to AJC Radio tonight. As we have, I'll tell you what, gone down a road that is one of the most uncomfortable roads we've had to travel here, but we're going to travel it because the issue at hand is the no-care attitude of wrongful convictions. We're dealing with the Brendan Dassey story. We've been joined by Tracy Keogh. She's writer for World Vision Australia and creative activist and marketer for Brendan Dassey. Let me tell you something, folks. And Tracy, are you with us?
I am, yes.
This story of Brendan Dassey is probably one of the most horrific tales of abuse to the mentally challenged. And takes you down a road that to what lengths will people go to secure a conviction? I mean, this is a child who has been in prison the last 13 years. And when a judge had the integrity to call it what it was and say that the police coerced this young man, they violated his constitutional right under the law. You have a 7-panel judge panel that comes back and says, "Well, no, we're going to uphold the conviction." Just ignore what the judge said. The magistrate judge said that this was coerced. It was unconstitutional, and don't even bring to the table the mental health issues suffered by Mr. Dassey. 16 years old, and Tracy, from what you tell us, he had the mindset anywhere from a 5 to an 11-year-old mentally.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
This is criminal. No matter how we call it, it's a criminal situation. Tell us a little bit about Stephen Avery, Tracy, and how they tried in this particular situation to piece together this bogus theory of a crime. And when I read some of the details, the mutilation of a body, Brendan would have had no mental capability to carry that out.
No,
Talk to us about
again,
that.
it's worth noting that Brendan Dassey didn't hunt, right? And we know hunting in rural Wisconsin is part of the culture. People grow up learning how to hunt. But Brendan didn't hunt. Brendan suffered from sinucose, so he would actually faint at the sight of blood.
Oh, wow.
And, that's hardly the makings of a murderer, right?
That's
but
right.
all of these things about Brendan meant nothing to the state and meant nothing to, the prosecution. I mean, putting it simply, right, the state argued to Avery's jury that contrary to Brendan's March 1st story, that Miss Halbach was killed in the garage. And the state argued that only one man was responsible for her death, and that man was Stephen Avery. Yet to Brendan's jury, the state comes back and argues that Miss Halbach was stabbed and killed in Stephen Avery's bedroom, according to Brendan's March 1st statement, and that both Avery and Brendan were responsible for her death. It's insane. It's insanity. I'm very far removed from a lawyer, but even I get that makes absolutely no judicial sense. Brendan was sentenced to life in prison with the earliest possibility of parole in 2048. So we know that that's a de facto life without parole sentence. The jury took 4.5 hours to convict this child. He didn't stand a chance. And I think that, there's many failings from the state and from the prosecution. I mean, we can touch on them if you like. We can talk about, the impact of prosecutorial misconduct. But I think one of the major contributors here was the Ken Kratz press conference, which I'm sure you saw when you watched Making a Murderer. The theft of Brendan and Stephen Avery's presumption of innocence is a major contributor to their wrongful conviction. The DA gave a presser on March the 2nd, so they've got their false statement on the 1st. They worked really hard to get that statement. It took them 4 or 5 goes to embed that narrative in Brendan. He gives the presser, he issues a warning. It's a dramatic event, telling people not to let their children under, the age of 15 listen in. And then he narrates Brendan's false and coerced confession to millions. To mention that Brendan had confessed was prejudicial enough, but Kratz then goes on to vouch for the truth of the confession. He's saying, we know what happened to Teresa Halbach. Brendan and Stephen Avery were never going to get a fair trial after that. Never. It would have been impossible. And, there were ethical rules governing pretrial publicity in Wisconsin. There's the Wisconsin Rule of Professional Conduct. But Kratz didn't care, and no one held him accountable to that, you know. No one ever filed complaints. No one basically cared. And, you know, with Stephen, Brendan was targeted. And Ken Kratz is actually, there's an article where Ken Kratz openly says that Brendan Dassey was targeted. And we know that he was targeted for numerous reasons and through different avenues. But, you know, obviously being Stephen Avery's alibi, he was with Stephen supposedly that night, helping Stephen clean up the yard. As they did all the time. They lived on a salvage yard. This is what they did. It's how they lived.
Mm-hmm. And for Mr. Avery, have you been in touch with his people?
No. My focus is very much on Brendan Dassey. Stephen has some incredible advocates that, you know, put their time and effort into his case. You know, his lawyer, Kathleen Zellner, is a force of nature. And, you know, recently we know that the state appeals court ruled against Stephen in, you know, his latest efforts.
And that was yesterday, right?
Yeah, it was released Wednesday morning. And, you know, they found claims made by Avery were insufficient on the face to entitle him to a hearing. And the circuit court did not erroneously exercise its discretion and denied the motions to vacate and for consideration. Now, I'm aware of the most incredible researchers in this case that dig into the minutiae of this case that aren't on the payroll of anybody. And there are so many factual errors in their decision-making in this opinion. But what I thought was interesting about it myself was that Kathleen Zellner came out and she tweeted, you know, that it points out specific doors that are still open for Stephen to pursue freedom through. And, you know, she thanked them for their careful review. I think that, you know, there's no doubt that she will continue to pursue release for Stephen Avery. And I think if there is anybody that can achieve that outcome, it would be Kathleen Zellner. But I mean, it's horrific. Stephen's been subjected to 2 wrongful convictions. He's lost life to incarceration.
Let me ask you a question, Tracy. Have you talked to Brendan as of late?
I don't talk to Brendan, but I certainly keep in contact with him through emails, yes. Okay,
how's he doing?
You know, Brendan's a really hopeful, sweet and gentle guy. You know, he receives letters from people all over the world, and that is, you know, that lifts his spirits. And I think it's so important because, you know, for those moments that he gets to immerse himself in the world of the people that are supporting him, it takes him away from the confines of, you know, the 8x4 that he's forced to live in. But he is so hopeful, and he's incredibly thoughtful of other people. And, you know, he's somebody that should never walk past a correctional facility, let alone spend the last 15 years of his life, you know, confined to one. He's a good man. He's grown into a good man in the most horrific of circumstances, which is a testament to who he is.
Well, I do want you to add to the list for Brendan that a Just Cause organization, AJC Radio, is in support of his freedom. That we are vehemently angry, outraged for what they've done to him, and that he has a friend and a support system here at Just Cause organization, and we will continue to stay in touch with you. I'm truly saddened for that young man because we live,
and that's exactly right. Sad.
It's just you cannot as Dennis alluded to, seeing the making of a murderer and the interrogation part of that documentary, to see that is over the top. It's that doesn't seem humanly possible that we would do that to a young boy and claim our system is the best in the world. It's just it's hypocritical. It's not true. And if anybody's proof of that, Brendan is. There was something, Tracy, that you wanted to read from Brendan?
Yeah, so Brendan wanted to share a little message to everyone, particularly the community behind Brendan Dassey is full of amazing, incredibly generous and kind people. He has brought together, exceptional people from all over the world to fight for him. And he's very thankful for that. And a message Brendan wanted to share with everyone listening is, please tell everyone on the radio station that I love them and that I am very thankful and grateful for everyone who is supporting and fighting for me and for my family for all these years. Thank you. And that's Brendan. Brendan.
Hey, has there been any national media attention like a CNN or MSNBC? Has any of them? I've read reports where they reported on the court's ruling, but they haven't really gotten involved to actually report that this was an outrage and with no opinion or nothing. You haven't seen anything along those lines?
Not recently. Around the time of the writ of certiorari that was sitting with the United States Supreme Court, there was a lot of media. You had the New York Times, you had the Washington Post. Everybody was talking and addressing the factors at the center of Brendan's wrongful conviction, and it was positive. It all spoke to in support of Brendan. I think things have quietened down on that front, insofar as once the clemency petition was filed, which had great fanfare, there was a lot of support, incredible support behind that clemency petition in the October of 2019, and with that came a lot of interest from the media. Myself, supported and funded by a lot of incredible people, we launched a billboard campaign across Wisconsin from the September through to the end of December, and that we got some media attention, some national media attention. It was syndicated, an article, and all those types of things. So that was great. But coming up, we are about to unleash ourselves on Wisconsin once again, because we can't stop saying Brendan Dassey's name, right? We can't stop talking about it, because there are, for every wrongfully convicted person that we're aware of, there are potentially hundreds of thousands that we're not. So the ones that we're aware of, I think we have a duty to do as much as we possibly can as free people to see justice served, and to see justice served for Brendan in this case. So as of next week in Wisconsin, there's another billboard campaign. There's a lot of initiatives planned. We're doing an error flyover. Everything is targeted at the governor, of course. We are extremely disappointed in his apathy towards, a special ed student who has been wrongfully convicted. He didn't even review the petition. That's how much Brendan's life means to certain people, right? That he didn't even review the petition.
Is that the governor you're talking about?
Yeah. So he's got this arbitrary criteria that denies Brendan clemency. But this arbitrary criteria is in light of not even having reviewed the petition. It's it's certainly not in the spirit of what clemency and mercy is about. You know,
well, the governor
it's an exceptional.
And Tracy, the governor has the power to grant him clemency.
He has the sole power
to do it.
He doesn't need to defer to the legislator. You know, he has a pardons advisory board. He convened a pardons advisory board, but they only make recommendations. It's an executive power that sits with the governor alone. So he could decide today to release Brendan Dassey. He could commute his sentence, or he could grant him a pardon. He can do that today.
And Tracy, how many people are calling the governor's office daily in a mass campaign to do something? Has that happened?
Well, we kind of do everything we can. As I said, you know, you're talking about a community of people that are extremely passionate about this and are moved by their outrage and sadness in equal measure. So we have email zaps, we have phone zaps. We do them all the time. You know, the email zap, for example, is up around 500 people sending an email on the same day at the same time with the same message. And, you know, it's relentless, and we will continue to be relentless, because I think if we want to see the change, if we want to be part of the change that we want to see in the system, then we need to be this active. You know, if justice can't be sought within the confines of the system as it is, which is designed to incarcerate and maintain convictions, then the people must bring pressures from outside of the system to affect the change they want to see.
No, absolutely right.
That's what we need to do to get Brendan Dassey home.
Well, Tracy, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a quick break. I want to come back, and I want to give you, I want you to give us information to our listeners. I'm going to be respectful of your time. You've been great with us tonight. I don't want to hold you too long, because I believe we're going to be talking even more about this story. And please let Brendan know that a just cause is going to get behind the fight. We're going to get in the fight and do whatever we can on our end as an advocacy organization to contact the governor of Wisconsin and say, look, what are you going to do here? You can't have too many people crying out, making calls, and calling for justice for this young man, especially if it's I don't know if it's an election year for this governor, is it?
Yes, he's just announced that he's running for re-election.
Okay. So if he's running for re-election, he would have reason to take action for this young boy. And that's what we need to look into.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to come right back.
He ran the first time on criminal justice reform and has done nothing.
Oh, he did? Okay. All right, we're going to work together, me and you, and the other millions of people that are getting behind Brendan. We're going to get behind in this fight with you, okay? Again, I'm going to be respectful of your time, not holding you too long. We're going to come back, get your closing remarks, and cannot thank you enough for coming on this show tonight. Again, we're going to be covering this topic here over the next 3 weeks. So let's take a quick break, come back. Are you able to stay with us, or are we okay in letting you go? I'm going to do whatever works for you.
I will give all the time that I have to talk about Brendan Dassey, so I am absolutely fine to keep talking.
Okay, well then we're going to change the order of things. We're not going to come back with closing remarks. We're going to come back and we're going to continue to talk about Brendan Dassey tonight. And we're going to just take you all the way to the end of the show, another 35 minutes or so. And I was asking our folks, what time is it in Australia? It's about 11:30 there, a.m.?
That's right, yeah, 11:30 a.m. on a Friday morning.
All right. As long as you're not up at midnight, 1, 2 in the morning, then we're going to respect that. And we're going to come back and finish this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, feel free to dial in tonight, 646-200-0628, 646-200-0628. Brendan Dassey, a victim, unfortunately, in a system that has gone awry, and we're going to deal with that coming back with Tracy Keogh and the AJC Radio team. Folks, this is AJC Radio. We'll be right back.
Look, right now, while you're looking at this on your screen in your hand or on your computer, there's somebody just like you who's sitting in a prison cell. And they didn't do much more than you did, some crazy weekend. You didn't get caught. They got caught, and they can never get uncaught. The United States of America is now the number one incarcerator of human beings in the world, in the history of the world. We have about 5% of the world's population. We have 25% of the world's prisoners. We have more people locked up than China. China, who has 1 billion people, they got fewer prisoners than we do. You know, a lot of times people say, well, if you don't want to do the time, don't do the crime. Really? Have you ever committed a crime? You got people who are doing more drugs on college campuses, in yacht clubs, country clubs. We all know that's going on, but the SWAT team never shows up there. The SWAT team shows up in housing projects where you have poorer people doing fewer drugs, and those people go to prison. But think about it. What if one of the times when you were breaking the law, when you had something illegal in your pocket, in your car, at your party, the police had kicked in those doors? Would you want to be known for the rest of your life based on what happened that night? That is what is happening to millions of people. If rich folks' kids get in trouble, they go to rehab. Poor folks' kids get in trouble, they go to prison. And you spend $100,000 per year per kid to lock a kid up, when you could have spent a fraction of that and turned them into a NASA scientist, turned them into a fashion icon. When people come home from prison, they're not given the opportunity to start over. You leave a physical prison and you go into a social prison where you can't get a job, you can't get a student loan, you can't rent an apartment. How are people supposed to start over? And what happens to neighborhoods when you take a disproportionate number of people out for minor offenses and you send them back home with no hope and no opportunity? There are no more excuses to have this horrible system continue when there is now finally bipartisan agreement that it is a tragedy to do this. Not only do you have President Obama and the Democrats, you now actually have people like Paul Ryan, Koch Industries, Newt Gingrich, all saying the same thing. We are locking up too many people. We're wasting too much money. We're wasting too much genius in America, and it's time to do something.
How often does our justice system get it wrong, convicting innocent people of crimes they did not commit? A new project by the University of Michigan Law School and the Center for Wrongful Convictions at Northwestern University School of Law tries to answer that question. In the last 23 years, more than 2,000 people have been convicted of serious crimes and later exonerated, according to the National Registry of Exonerations. By far, the largest segment was almost 1,200 defendants falsely convicted because of large-scale patterns of police corruption, generally in drug and gun cases. Of the remaining 873 defendants exonerated, nearly half were wrongly convicted of murder, and of that group, 101 were sentenced to death. On average, it took more than 11 years for a conviction to be set aside. Why does the justice system get it wrong? In homicides, the biggest problem is perjury and false accusation, most often by supposed eyewitnesses. False convictions in adult rape cases are primarily based on mistakes by eyewitnesses, while false convictions in child sex abuse cases are often for fabricated crimes that never occurred. 2,000 exonerations may seem small in a nation with more than 2.3 million people behind bars, but there are far more false convictions than the report contains. Most false convictions are never formally challenged, and those convictions that are successfully overturned receive little or no attention from the media, according to the report's authors.
Here are 50 white guys. Here are 50 black guys. Here's how many white guys can expect to go to prison in their lifetime. The chances amount to 1 out of 17. Now here's how many black guys can expect the same thing. The chances are 1 out of 3. Why? Lots of reasons. It's complicated, but one thing is clear. There's racial bias at every level of the criminal justice system. When blacks and whites commit the same kind of crimes, blacks are more likely to be arrested. Once arrested, they're more likely to be convicted. Once convicted, they're more likely to serve longer sentences. Look at the numbers in America's so-called war on drugs. About 14% of American drug users are black, as are about a quarter of drug sellers. Yet blacks are 34% of the people arrested for drug crimes. And those convicted of drug crimes, 46% are black. By the time we factor in sentencing, there are actually more black drug offenders than white ones in state prisons and in federal prisons. In the end, the incarceration rate for drug crimes is 10 times higher for blacks than it is for whites. These are the facts. Racial disparity in America's war on drugs is one big reason that 1 out of 3 black men can expect to go to prison in their lifetime.
Almost every day in the news, we hear stories about innocent people who are returning home after spending years in prison for crimes they did not commit. What you may not know is that their problems don't end once the limelight fades. For many wrongfully convicted individuals don't receive a penny for the injustice that they faced. Take the case of Floyd Bledsoe. He spent 16 years in a Kansas prison for murder and rape he did not commit. And while Floyd was eventually exonerated, he lost everything. His family, his farm, and decades worth of income. Unfortunately, Floyd's story is not unique. Kansas, along with 17 other states, doesn't have a law to compensate wrongfully convicted individuals for the injustices they've suffered. And in states with compensation laws, many of those are woefully inadequate. We owe it to all the men and women in all 50 states to provide fair compensation to those who've suffered these injustices. Join me in urging our lawmakers to do the right thing by the wrongfully convicted. Go to innocenceproject.org to find out how you can help.
Do you know anyone who's been sent to prison who's innocent? The United States is experiencing record numbers of exonerations in cases where people were wrongfully convicted of crimes they did not commit. If you believe that no one should be sent to prison for crimes they didn't commit, there is something that you can do today. By remembering a just cause with a monthly, annual, or one-time donation, you can help in the fight against wrongful convictions. Call a just cause at 855-529-4252. or visit a-justcause.com and click the donate button. A Just Cause is a 501c3. Wrongful convictions are wrong. Let's be the voice of those who can't speak from behind the wall.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to AJC Radio tonight. As we have been troubled, we have been challenged to get involved with the innocent. Tonight, namely, Brendan Dassey of Wisconsin, that has been wrongfully convicted, has been in prison for 13 years. And I'll tell you right now, the story is heart-wrenching. We've been joined tonight by Tracy Keogh. She is writer for World Vision Australia and a creative activist and marketer for Brendan Dassey. I had the opportunity tonight, and to all of the followers and supporters of Clyde Beasley, I just had an opportunity to speak with him moments ago, who's going to be on our show next week. And Tracy, he is moved with sincere compassion for Brendan Dassey. He said to me that he had no idea that this was the kid that has suffered this type of injustice. He's going to be our featured guest next week, but he wanted me to pass on to you. He's in support of Mr. Dassey, and his thoughts and prayers are with you and all those that are fighting for Brendan. So I wanted to pass that on to you and to all of his followers. Please tune in next week. He will be our featured guest. But he wanted to share that, Tracy. Like you said, this apparently has become a movement that people are definitely intrigued to talk about.
Yeah, and thank you, and to all of you, and welcome to the fight for Brendan.
No, absolutely.
It is one of those cases that once you bear witness to what has happened, you don't walk past. You can't leave it. Justice needs to be served, and everybody is welcome in that fight.
Absolutely, and he really offered him to come on and to speak to you, and he said, I don't want to take away from her story tonight, and so unselfishly said, let this story be told, because he said he is intrigued with the dialogue, with the conversation that we're having tonight, and he's writing everything down. So, Mr. Beasley, thank you so much. If you're still listening to the show, and we'll be very happy to have Mr. Beasley on next week. But getting back now, Tracy, to Brendan. A lot of supporters, a lot of people out there. We are going to, as a just cause, find out. This is an election for for this governor in Wisconsin. It's an election time for him, and we're going to call him out on this failure to act initiative. Yeah. How don't you act in response to this type of injustice? How do you do it? And yet you want to come back to office and tell us, we're going to do criminal justice reform, but you leave a kid who is a grown man now but has suffered what Mr. Dassey has suffered, and you want us to go to the voting booth and vote you back in? Yeah. We're going to reach out to the people in Wisconsin. Don't vote for him.
Well, there's very little altruism in politics. We've witnessed it through our wrongful conviction. If, by and large, if politicians can't receive a political advantage, they're not interested in doing anything for people, maybe unless it's a member of their family. But that's just a sad commentary, given the high praise and the constant commentary you hear on the news about the greatness of the United States criminal justice system and things of that nature. But in the case of the IRP-5, there were over 70 plus trips made to Washington, D.C. to talk to congressmen. They couldn't believe that the wrongful conviction and some of the things that the judge and the prosecutor actually happened. But at the end of the day, they didn't do anything about it. Yet you see them holding hearings on President Trump, potential Russian collusion. They do all sorts of stuff when it's politically advantageous to do so. And that's the sad reality and the farce of American politics. And as a result, people like Brendan Dassey suffer. The courts as well. That it seems like we're just dealing with sadly, in the court system, and I said I don't want to paint everybody with a broad brush, but the results and the outcomes in a lot of cases in the court system is mired in politics, cronyism, and just blatant unfairness.
Yeah,
well, that's absolutely
and particularly
right.
The thing with sorry to cut you off there.
No, go ahead, Tracy.
The thing with Governor Evers is, on paper, he seems to be the right type of governor who would take on something like Brendan Dassey's case. He's been involved in education. He calls himself the education governor. And for me, when I think about his re-election, what worries me intensely is that if we go back before Governor Evers, the governor was a gentleman called, well, I don't know if he was a gentleman, to be honest, but he was called, went by the name of Scott Walker. And for 8 years, Scott Walker, he was tough on crime. He ran on that. He refused to instate a pardons board, and he refused to even consider clemency or pardons. So he did nothing for that in those 8 years. Now, I take an active interest in the politics of Wisconsin, particularly anything to do with, like at the moment, there's an expungement bill that they're trying to pass through the Senate, which effectively has the same outcomes as 99% of the pardons that Governor Evers grants. So I find that of interest to watch to see what's happening with that, but also to see the people that will be running for governor. And from what I've seen so far is we're looking at a lot of people who would align themselves with Scott Walker's mentality of the tough on crime, not looking at criminal justice reform at all. So we're in a between a rock and a hard place, so to speak. I think we need to bring the governor around. I think he is our best hope of clemency. And it's very much, I know that, a lot of governors are politically timid when it comes to clemency. Of course, they're playing politics. But the one thing with clemency is it needs no bipartisan support. It needs nothing from anyone else. It sits with this governor alone. So it's about getting this governor to be aware of Brendan Dassey's case on a level that he can read through the facts of the case, that he reviews that clemency petition, and he, like everybody else who comes across Brendan Dassey's case, will come away and say, there is an innocent young man serving time in a Wisconsin prison.
No, absolutely right. And again, it's not going to hurt for us as an organization to get involved, make phone calls, send emails.
Welcome it.
And I tell you what, we're going to do it. Clint, you had something to add to this story. I didn't want to bypass you. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just really interesting to see an Australian national fighting the fight for a Wisconsin citizen, an American citizen, and it really, is a reflection on the American people. Where's the American citizen fighting this battle? We have and God bless you, Tracy. We certainly appreciate it. But I wanted to say that the National Institute of Health had done a study back in 2017 and showed that there are now 10 times more individuals with serious mental illnesses in prisons and jails than there are in state mental hospitals. Sure. I mean, it really is a shame. The United States, when we look in the mirror, what do? We put the mentally ill people in prison, incarcerate them. We shut down all the state hospitals and then just send them to jail. This is something I could really get passionate about, and I believe the underlying issue goes back to money. How much is the funding? How much is the budget on each one of those heads that are incarcerated? For it's a money issue. The underlying issue is money and power. I remember being in prison, and my cellmate used to work at the Supermax, and he approached his boss. He had a pretty good boss to work for. He worked in the library, and he said, "Why haven't you guys let out the First Step Act inmates that are eligible?" He said, "Well, if we let them all out, what are we going to do for jobs?" That was his response, and it was about the budget. If you let these people out, we're going to lose budget, and then we're going to lose job slots. It's going to be not. And what about my job if all these people get out that are innocent and that should be out?
Well, I believe the human element has left the building.
Yes.
That's left a long time ago.
Yeah.
Right.
That train left the station.
Because when
it's a profit exercise. I think in Wisconsin it costs like $33,000 per person incarcerated per year. So if you look at Brendan Dassey as an example, you've got 15 plus years and sadly counting at this stage. That's a lot of money out of the taxpayers' back pockets for an innocent man. And God knows, I'm sure he's not the only innocent man in Wisconsin.
No, he's not. And I am familiar with Governor Walker doing his time as governor in Wisconsin. He was known for standing against, I believe it was the teachers' union, for teachers out there. And so that's how I learned a little bit about Mr. Walker. Again, you made the point earlier as far as folks being timid in granting clemency. That's the power that's been given. You know, the sad part about clemency, you know someone has been done wrong in the system. That's why clemency is in place. That we ask the governor to, so you know we have an issue. You know there are innocent people in prison. To the statistics that Clint just read regarding the mental health, those that have been, and then you have stories of those that have been abused, the mentally ill in prisons, that have been taken a step further to be abused and harassed and bullied by correctional officers. This is inhumane, and that's what it actually comes down to. So, Tracy, again, our back is against the wall here on this particular show. I'm going to extend an invitation to you anytime in the next 3 weeks to come on. You're welcome to do that as you have time to call in. Please feel free to do that. I'm going to be in touch with you as well offline. As we go forward in fighting for Brendan. Please tell him that a Just Cause AJC Radio, our thoughts and prayers are with him as we seek to fight justice and find justice for him during this very difficult time, but that we are on board for this fight, okay? And I appreciate you.
I'm sure that will be, yeah. I mean, the system makes promises, right? But it's humans who break them. And that's right. It's never been truer than what has happened to Brendan Dassey in his experience of the criminal justice system.
It's unbelievable. It's one of the most difficult stories I've ever had to look into. I am going to familiarize myself, and I'd recommend our host do it as well. When we talk to you again, The Making of a Murderer. We're going to watch that and dissect that. So when we come back, boy, we're going to have a lot to talk about. This is some serious stuff. It had an impact on our co-host, Dennis, to the point he couldn't even believe, Dennis, that after seeing that, how is he still in prison? It was that profound to you.
Yes, and when everybody's, I'm telling you, when the hosts, the remaining hosts that have not yet seen it, when they watch it, it is heart-wrenching. It is. You look at this show and you're like, I mean, even with his uncle, I mean, it'll make you go, wow. And they actually got away with put those two people in prison for life. It's just out of control.
Well, we're going to fight, and we're going to get in the fight. And any closing statements, Tracy, you'd like to tell our listeners what they can do to join in this fight? Any information you'd like to give out, feel free to do so now.
Yeah, sure. I think it's important that people who are behind Brendan, people who want to get behind Brendan, that they know that there are options for Brendan. So this is not hopeless, right? There's a lot of hope here. Brendan can file a post-conviction motion back in state court using newly discovered evidence, perhaps an ineffective assistance claim, and he can petition for clemency again. And one thing I do know is that he has fierce and formidable legal representation, law and writer, Stephen Drizzen, and the incredible people they bring together to fight for him. They have a team working to investigate the case and uncover new findings as we speak. So there is a lot of hope. And I think if people want to help Brendan, they want to get involved, get educated on the legal system, write to Brendan. This is our first port of call, right? Write to Brendan. Let him know that you're here and that you're fighting for him. Keep saying his name. Keep sharing his story. And, as long as we keep his profile going and having said that, every month I watch through Facebook groups that I'm involved in and other social media platforms that there is a wave of people that comes in nearly every single month who have discovered Making a Murderer, have discovered Brendan's story, and they're like, what can I do? What can I do to help? First thing you can do is you can write to Brendan. Let him know that you're fighting for him.
Thank you so very much for that. And I'm going to follow you on Facebook as well. And we're going to go forward and fight for this is a cause, and it's a just cause that we need to get involved.
It absolutely is, and welcome to it. Yes.
Thank you so very much, Tracy, and taking
Thank
time
you for
today.
having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And again, the door's always open here for you to be on this show. So let's get in the fight and let's see what we can get done for Brendan. And again, we're going to write him and get the information. Where do we write? All of that good stuff. Did you want to share that with our listeners where to write to Brendan app?
Yeah, sure. They can find all of the contact details to write to Brendan on my website, which is freedomforbrendandassey.com. If you just go to the contact section, you will find all of the different outreach initiatives, how to sign up to the emails app, how to write to Brendan, all of the details there. If you want to contribute to his commissary, if you want to contribute or get involved with his legal team, it's all there. It's all there. And let's do this. Let's do this.
No, absolutely, Tracy. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Again, it's evening here, but daytime there. So enjoy the rest of your day. And our thoughts and prayers are with you and all those that are fighting for Brendan, and we appreciate you. And again, we'll be in touch offline, and let's work together to hopefully to get this done.
Fantastic. And thank you for doing the good work. And let's make some good trouble.
Absolutely right. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day, okay?
You too. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
All right. There you have it, folks. Tracy Keogh, an advocate in Australia, as Clint alluded to, fiercely fighting for Brendan Dassey. We're coming back with our closing remarks on this show. Wrongful convictions at an all-time high, and a society and a system that simply does not care. This is AJC Radio. We'll be right back.
Please have a seat. I'll be honest. Your resume, no one amused you.
I know.
Okay, so what would you bring to my company?
What do you need?
I need a hard worker.
Good. I've got 2 part-time jobs, and I help my parents pay the bills.
I need problem-solving skills.
I got through high school without a car, a phone, or a computer.
No college degree, though.
Not yet, but life's taught me a lot, and I'm ready for more.
Well, you're not the typical kind of candidate that I hire. But you are exactly what I'm looking for.
Your company could be missing out on the candidates it needs most. Learn how to find, cultivate, and train a great pool of untapped talent at gradsoflife.org.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to AJC Radio tonight, as we have been honored and truly benefited, if you will, from our guest, Tracy Keogh, writer for World Vision Australia and a creative activist and marketer for Brendan Dassey. The gentleman, young boy, locked up at the age of 16 for a crime he didn't commit. Mentally challenged, and the mentally ill who suffer behind the walls of prisons all across this country. But in this case, what makes it more troubling that this was a kid with the mental capacity of a 5 to 11-year-old kid. They interrogated this young boy, asking questions every 9 seconds. Not the capacity to even understand what was going on, nor did he have the capacity to commit the crime that they have wrongfully convicted this young boy of, to the point where a magistrate judge came back made the statement that this kid was coerced by officers, that his constitutional rights under the law were violated. Absolutely horrific. I would recommend, ladies and gentlemen, that you go watch the Netflix documentary series "Making a Murderer," and we're gonna be having talks with Tracy in the near future as this series continues. And to all of the followers for Clyde Beasley, a guest who deferred to finish our story with Tracy tonight. He is founder and director of the Prison Reform Project and Jobs for Ex-Felons. He's going to be joining us next week. To all of his listeners and all those that tuned in, I'll tell you right now, talking to Mr. Beasley, he was very troubled with what he heard about this young man and the fate that befell him. He's going to be talking about that next week as well on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, tune into the show. Tell your friends, tell your family. We do understand that most folks do tune in to us via online. Feel free to pass that message on. If you'd like to call in anytime during the show, that number is 646-200-0628, 646-200-0628. I would also recommend that folks would contact the governor of Wisconsin and call, email, hit their social media pages up, and cry out for the release of Brendan Dassey. That's what we need to do. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you what, this has been again, as Dennis alluded to, I alluded to, and others here, a heart-wrenching show about this young man, and he actually sent a message of love to all those that were tuning into the show tonight in the midst of his situation. That speaks volumes about the character of Mr. Dassey. We're going to do our best to fight for him and do what we can to find justice. Samson, your closing remarks on this show.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we're doing multiple shows on this one, because the fact of the matter is like we said at the beginning of the show, we'd rather have thousands of guilty men go free than one person that is innocent be behind bars. And the fact of the matter is that someone with such a heart and such limited capacity, as Mr. Dassey has spent so long behind bars, is an absolute travesty. I look forward to, helping cry out against this, and for him and all the others that are locked up behind bars, wrongfully, to get the message out there and to move people that are in charge to take the actions that are at their disposal. This governor has clemency in his hands. We, as the populace, have to use our voice for those that can't, speak for themselves.
And again, good point made. Ladies and gentlemen, until next time, this is AJC Radio signing off tonight. Be safe and continue our ways to fight for justice. This is AJC Radio. Until next time, good night.